Welcome to week 3 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University. So announcements, paper 1, the collection strategy is due now, tonight, yesterday, depending on when you're watching this. I did not get any requests for extensions, and I'm not going to give any, especially this late in the game. So I'll have those marked to you by this time next week. Secondly, ChatGPT. If you didn't hear about it, this is the artificially intelligent chat system where you can ask a question and you get a very cogent answer back. If you've read about it, you've seen the news about it, obviously we're worried about a plagiarism issue coming up. So a couple of things. One, I'm not going to forbid you from using it. Actually, I think it's a tool. I think it's actually a good tool to use in this class. If you have questions, if there's a subcategory you need some more answers, I would ask the question and see the answer that come back. But I just want to caution you. One, if you plagiarize from ChatGPT at a graduate level, I will know about it. It's pretty obvious when it's a kind of a canned answer, because some of these questions or some of these paper topics are very specific. So one, just keep that in mind. And two, if you use it as a source, cite it in some way. Okay, I have no problem using it as a source, but just make sure you have that in as a citation. But yeah, I don't think we can. Well, until a university policy comes out, I don't think we can bar use of this, and it can be helpful in this program. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. So review of last week. Obviously, we talked about requirements and integration into a collection plan. I think you'll see that I hopefully I'll see that in your paper. The rest of the topic was intelligence traps or cognitive traps that are effective of all, not just intelligence field, but any field where you only get a partial read on the information and you have to fill in the data by yourself. So police investigators, doctors, those types of professions where you use heuristics. Your mind comes up with an answer to fill in the blanks that you don't always have. And common ones, again, confirmation bias. This is the classic one. We have a theory, and then we fit all future information to fit around that theory. That's a classic trap, analytical trap that we're all susceptible to. Mirror imaging. We think whether it's an adversary, a competitive business, or a criminal, we think that they're going to have the same incentive structure and motivations that we would have, when clearly there are massive differences in how different cultures, different groups approach various issues. And then we had the confessions case study. And this is the classic where you'll see many of these biases jump out in this. And the first one, classic confirmation bias. And I think most people alluded to this in their discussion. You have a theory, and then all the information was used to fit around the theory that the Norfolk that these naval sailors were responsible for the rape and murder. That's confirmation bias. Vividness bias. This occurred in several ways, mainly with the confessions. Detective Ford knew that a confession played in front of a jury would have the largest impact, more so than DNA evidence or timelines or those other issues. And the way that those confessions came out, I broke into her apartment. I pinned her down. I took off her clothes, and then I'm not going to get into more detail here. The way that came across was very impactful for the jury. It's very hard to set that aside and talk about DNA evidence and trace evidence and those types of issues. Negative evidence. We have a bias towards who's the killer. This is the person, the killer. This is the evidence that aligns to that they are the killer because they confessed. we don't look at it from the negative aspect. We don't ask, well, if he is the killer, why aren't we seeing motivation? Why aren't we seeing trace evidence? Why aren't we seeing DNA? Why aren't we seeing a fixed timeline? So, we focus on this guy's the killer, here's the reasons XYZ. We don't focus on if he is the killer, why are we not seeing ABC? So that was evident in this case, and you're going to see that in the Iraq WMD case study and other case studies that we talk about in this course. And then clientelism. In this case, there was pressure to find the killer because the clients were the people of Norfolk, and there was pressure to find him. They didn't want a killer out on the prowl, so there was enormous pressure to get these arrests and conviction. And that's basically, again, a client. Many of you will see this in the intel profession where you want to please your client, and so you will do all sorts of information. You'll twist the information in ways to please the client. That's what happened here. So finally, or two things I just want to bring up. Georgetown values. I don't know if, Georgetown's a Jesuit Catholic school, and I don't know if anyone here is Jesuit, Catholic, religious. I doubt that was one of the reasons you chose to come to Georgetown. But we do have a Jesuit background that does believe in justice, that the people who graduate from this program have a sense of justice. And you saw a gross miscarriage of justice here. And before we just pin it on Detective Ford, as many of you did, I would just remind you that it was detectives, it was prosecutors, it was judges, it was appellate judges, all the way up to the governor's office. And they all, in some cases, didn't see this crime or this false crime in the way that you all saw. And just as a reminder, justice for this, the documentary ended in 2011. Justice didn't happen until 2019. You saw their sentences were vacated. So that happened in 2010 at the end of the documentary. In 2013, their names were finally their names were finally cleared, and off the sexual crimes list. So that didn't happen until 2013. And then the final lawsuits didn't happen until 2019 from both the state and the county of Virginia. So it took a long while for justice to take hold in this. And that's just something, we're training you to be in these positions. You be an investigator or a prosecutor or somewhere in this chain to think through the humanity of these people and the what you're doing has impact. So that's the Georgetown Files. And finally, I want to bring up this question that was brought up to a student a few years ago. It's an interesting debate. Good people suffer from analytical bias. We all do. And you're going to see in future cases intelligence analysts who don't have an agenda, but they still had these biases. Bad people don't suffer from these biases. Bad people had criminal intent. And in this case, Detective Ford didn't suffer from biases. He had a criminal motivation. I don't know. That's kind of a hard question for me to ask, or a hard question for me to answer. I'm tempted to say that, yes, he wasn't a biased person. He was just a criminal element. However, I will remind you, one, that, again, prosecutors, juries, judges, appellate judges, etc., all suffered. And certainly not all those people had criminal intent. So that's number one. And number two, this probably goes along with my negative view on humanity, but I think we could all be Detective Fords under certain conditions. Under certain conditions, we are all capable of creating this incredible miscarriage of justice. So, interesting thought process. Is this analytical bias, or is this just really a criminal intent by one man? I'll let you decide. Okay, so week 3 preview. Again, we're going to go back in history and look at 2 case studies of strategic surprise, Pearl Harbor and the Yom Kippur War. And then as you're reading through these case studies, ask, where were the failures? Was it in collection? Was it in analysis? Was it in policy, the interface between the intelligence analyst and the policy makers or decision makers? Was it the policymakers failing to act? They got all their information right, but they just failed to act for one reason or another. And then finally, were there just underlying circumstances? This is the stuff happens kind of scenario that maybe everything was right, but just bad luck and bad conditions led to these intelligence failures. And the one thing I ask again is, we're going to talk about Capitol Hill later on, the Capitol Hill riot intelligence failure. But I believe some of the dynamics that you're going to see in these failures were relevant to the Capitol Hill intelligence failure. So the readings, the Dahl, great book, Intelligence is Surprise Attack, the Yom Kippur War, the Bruce Riddell article on the Yom Kippur War, and then the Al Jazeera documentary. The total documentary is 3 hours. I only assigned the first part, the 1 hour, and I really want to focus on those first 30 minutes of that 1 hour documentary. So those are there is a great Netflix on Pearl Harbor. I'm not going to require it, but it just came out a few weeks ago, or at least I saw it a few weeks ago, and that covers the intelligence failure surrounding Pearl Harbor as well. So that I'll make that optional, and you could just Netflix Pearl Harbor, and you'll see it come up going forward. So I know this is a long video, but if there's questions or issues, please let me know.